Hello, hello, hello. Summer Solstice 2020. It's so beautiful here. Sun is shining. And I'm going to give a little talk to the world. A little talk to the world about science and truth. You see, in the last 2 months has shown us quite clearly, demonstrated completely clearly, that scientists who work for the government are idiots. And that raises the question of scientists generally. I mean, science means truth. I mean, that's what it is, scientia, truth. So I want to say a few words about science and truth. I've been a scientist all my life. I prefer to think natural philosopher, but anyway, whatever words you put, whatever label you give it, ultimately it's about trying to seek out what's true and discard what is false. That's what science is supposed to be about. Pontius Pilate famously responded to Jesus in the Bible. He said, "What is truth?" And that is an excellent question. In fact, we live now in an age of fake news and internet craziness and so forth. But in 1992, when I started, more than 30 odd years ago now, when I started investigating science and the scientific description of the effects of radiation, ionizing radiation, and the effects of all the other things that have been produced in the last century and which are contaminating the planet. I was in the Green parties. I started out asking these questions about science because in the Green Party there were no scientists. There was nobody who could look at the scientific papers in the scientific literature and say, look, that's not right. Who actually had the sort of machinery, the knowledge and the mathematical machinery to analyse what there was there. So I set up an operation called Green Audit in 1992 with Patrick Adams, who was a scientist, and then later on Molly Scott Cato, who I was living with then, came on board. And the website greenoudit.org is still there, but the point of Green Audit was to investigate dishonesty, scientific dishonesty. Nobody investigates scientific dishonesty. There was a Danish committee on scientific dishonesty, but it disappeared. So that's where we started. There was no green scientists, there were at least very few. And in fact, in the government, there are no scientists either. Molly and I and Richard Bramhall did a study of the members of Parliament and discovered that very few of them had even A-levels in science and mathematics. Most of them didn't. Most of them didn't even have O-levels in science and mathematics. So how could they possibly make decisions? Well, what they do is they have a scientific advisor. Well, we've seen recently what the scientific advisors do. They advise them all sorts of things which actually turn out later to be wrong. Nobody sends them to jail, of course. I mean, the number of people who've died as a result of the response of Boris Johnson's government to the virus epidemic, I mean, the number of people is enormous. I mean, if you look to see, the United Kingdom has the highest level of deaths per million population of any European country. Here in Latvia, we've had hardly any because the government took control immediately and locked everything down. In England, they just sort of took their evidence from Imperial College, evidence which right at the beginning, using mathematical modelling, told them that the peak would be in August of this year. Of course, they were completely wrong. I mean, at that time I was looking at the numbers, never mind about mathematical modelling in terms of the rate of transfer of the virus, but you just had to look at the graph. That's all you had to do. And I modelled it as a chemical equilibrium, as a chemical reaction, a kinetic theory reaction, and I figured out that the peak was going to be on the 13th of April, and guess what? The peak has been on the 14th of April, so that was pretty good, because I did that back on the 13th of March, on the basis of the first few data points. So it was easy to do that, you see, but the scientists didn't do that. They did something else and they got it wrong. So my point is that science is not a crystallized version of the truth. It's a lot of different people all looking at different bits of evidence and drawing different conclusions. And the last century has seen lots and lots of situations where scientific advice to government has been madly wrong, wildly wrong, based on reductionism, scientific reductionism. This is like taking complicated facts and reducing them to simple ones and then encapsulating them in a sort of black box and saying this is the truth. But it's not the truth. And I can tell you lots and lots of instances where it's not the truth. Ionizing radiation is one of the millions, more than 60 million people have died as a result of the scientific description, the false scientific description of the effects of ionizing radiation. And more will die, of course, because this model is still continuing, although I've been fighting it all my life. Right. So what I want to talk about, or to present to you, is a concept called the wall of facts. Okay? So this was something that was figured out, that was developed, an idea that was developed by David Davis, who I knew long ago. He was the founder, he was the son of the founder of the National Library of Wales, and he lived in Alderney. But anyway, I got friendly with him, and he said, look, why don't we take all the facts that we know or think we know, and we can colour them different colours according to how sure we are of them, and stick them all up on the wall. If you buy a book, a scientific book, or if you read a scientific paper, or you go to look and see what you think is a fact, you can write down a fact in one sentence, like if you drop an apple it falls. It doesn't go up in the air, it falls down. That's a pretty certain fact, we all know that. Of course, it's possible on the basis of the kinetic theory of gases for it to go in any direction. But we have to say that the high probability is that it falls, and we say that's due to gravity. So gravity is an idea that we've had that describes why the ball falls, okay? So on this wall of facts, you have everything there associated with the thing that you're considering, you know. So you have a huge wall, and all these facts are written down on the wall. And then a scientist comes along and he looks at those facts and he says, on the basis of these facts, because of this and this and this and this and that, this is the answer, okay? This is how it works. And so he writes down this theory, and then other scientists come along and say, yes, that certainly looks plausible. And so after a while he gets to be a professor, and they all get to be senior lecturers, and they write lots and lots of scientific papers about this idea. And it slowly becomes the main idea of science in relation to that stuff that you're concerned about. Okay? Like if you take ionizing radiation, one example. And so that becomes black boxed into a description of whatever it is. So there's a big black box, and inside this black box are all these ideas that other scientists have had about this wall of facts. And then that's the theory, and then eventually it becomes like doctrine, and then it becomes like catechism, and then that's what everybody believes. That's it. So and then becomes truth. We write that truth, T-R-U-T-H. That's the truth about the effects of ionizing radiation. Or for ionizing radiation, name anything. Vaccines, effective vaccines. You can talk about the effects of Wi-Fi routers, or the effects of mobile phone radiation. Do they cause cancer? All of these things. You can have the Monsantification of the world, you know, with all these DNA spliced stuff that they're producing in seeds. And all the work that's been done on DNA, which of course ultimately has given us COVID-19, which has killed rather a lot of people. So science hasn't been a good thing for the human race, as the Unabomber pointed out. There are lots of reasons why we should be wary of science, and in fact in the famous science fiction book A Canticle for Leibowitz, they hanged all the scientists from lampposts. Anyway, back to the wall of facts. This is the important point. It is that someone else can come along and look at the same wall of facts and choose different facts and construct a different theory. Okay, that's the point. But that different theory never gets there, because in this sort of scientific development system that there is, with all these publications and so forth, very rapidly what happens is that the ability to publish an alternative theory becomes blocked, because the people who are the referees, and whose position as the referees and as authorities, if you like, or experts, they won't allow it in. So you can have something that you know is true because you've chosen the facts that support it, but because they doesn't operate on the same level, doesn't have the same theoretical basis as the idea that was black boxed originally, it doesn't get published. And as a result of this, we have a world where everything is going to pieces, where people are dying in front of your eyes, where the cancer rate is going through the roof, where children are not being born anymore, where you have loss of fertility, you have sperm counts going right completely down. All of these things, and lots of other horrible things. Let's not go into all of them, but we all know them. We all know these things. But scientists come along, particularly scientific advisors to government, and they say, oh, well, it's not a problem. For instance, if you have a mobile phone next to your head, all it does is it increases the temperature of your body by about half a degree, or a quarter, or a millionth, or some number, so some rational number that they calculate on the basis that your head is actually a bowl of water. You see, this is the point. See, the problem with physicists, and most of these scientific advisors to government are physicists, is they cannot deal with anything if they can't describe it mathematically. And that was the same with COVID, you see. If you want to know how many people are going to die of COVID and when they're going to die and all that, you set up some monstrous scientific equation, some big mathematical equation, and you model it all in a computer. But you get it wrong. That's the point, you get it wrong. I was at the Royal Society giving a response to the Royal Society paper, a report, big fat report, on depleted uranium. And depleted uranium has poisoned all the people of Iraq. I mean, the congenital malformation rate has gone through the roof. People are dying of cancer. The soldiers who come back from Iraq have got lymphoma. In America, their children have all got congenital malformations and so forth. Same as the nuclear test veterans, who I represented in court and still represent in court. And the problem is, of course, you know, that it can't be right. They say, well, this can't be right because it doesn't fit in with scientific opinion. Scientific opinion. So this is the point. The wall of facts means that you can have lots and lots of different theories, but only one of them makes it through, and then that becomes the accepted theory. And nowadays, because, of course, increasingly over the last century, scientists are bought and sold. They're employed by Monsanto. They're employed by ICI, they're employed by the military, and they're employed by the nuclear industry, like Richard Wakeford, my particular bête noire. So what I want to say to you all is you must be very careful about science, and you must not believe anything because they say it's scientifically proven. And not only that, but you must be very careful about rational thought, because rational thought is only as good as its input. I'm here in Latvia in the middle of nowhere. I escaped the COVID thing. And I'm out here now thinking about what to do next about this problem, because what is at stake is our children. What is at stake is the human race, is the planet. And if we don't stop these rational thinking scientists, we've had it. We really have. So I want to found, not fund, because we don't need a lot of money for this, you know. We just need thinking. We need people to detach themselves from their job and their work and all their worthless occupations and start to turn their mind to try and improve the world and try and break out from this crazy machine that has been constructed around science and economics. So this is the Summer Solstice message to you all from Christopher, old Christopher, living in Latvia in the forest. And I hope you have a very happy solstice. And I hope in particular, if you're young people, that you take some notice of what I'm saying and try to think about how you might detach yourself from your work. Because work is a major problem. As long as you go to work, you won't have time to think about this stuff. And somebody has to think about it. So detach yourself from your mobile phones and all those sort of frippery devices and try to think about reality. Think about science, think about logic, think about rational thought, and think about nature. And thank you for listening. And happy summer solstice.